Erdogan recently declared Turkey is gonna open its borders and potentially allow 3.6 million migrants to flow into Europe. Since then, thousands have already attempted to reach Greece, while Turkish police have been firing volleys of tear gas towards Greece in return. Ironically enough, Turkey also sent out 1,000 special police to sabotage Greece and prevent them from sending back their migrants. And this is all being done as some kind of political blackmail against Europe. This is probably the 9th time Erdogan has threatened to create a new migrant crisis, and Turkey has that power given their geographical role as gatekeepers to Europe. But before, it's mainly been words. This time, they actually had Turkish officials buying tickets and transporting people in shiny Mercedes-Benz buses to Greece. As a result, nearly 13,000 migrants flocked in just a matter of days and demanded that they open their borders to Europe. A human smuggler was very happy about this, as he openly bragged to the media. Quote, "I made sure that half of Europe is overloaded with migrants, and I get 500 euros per person doing this. Erdogan made this very profitable for me." Now, we all know human smugglers are the ones responsible for all the deaths happening across the Mediterranean, so clearly Erdogan couldn't give a shit less about refugees.
Nasıl aşağı ya? Çocuk var. Çocuk var. Nasıl böyle?
Botla geçirecek. Bot. Bak Türk askerisi botla geçirecek. Botla geçeceğiz Yunan'a.
İstemiyorum ya. İstemiyorum ya. İstemiyorum.
O zaman niye geldiniz? Niye geldiniz?
Sen de artık.
ساكنين بعدها يالان بليت يالان بعد.
Herkes şu an aşağı inecek. İnmeyen döverim. Hadi koş. Yürü. Yürü lan. Yürü. İnin. İn aşağı. Oğlum inin lan. İn diyorum size. Ya benim sorunum ne? Niye geldin o zaman buraya? Sen niye geldin o zaman?
Erdogan's defense is that Turkey is tired of helping Europe out by carrying the biggest load of refugees, but when you look into it deeper, that's really just a smokescreen, as A, the refugees in Greece are neither Syrian nor refugees. It's mostly economical migrants consisting of Afghanis, Iraqis, and Iranians. The Syrians in Turkey have pretty much settled in there. And B, Erdogan wants NATO to help him take over part of northern Syria. That's why this threat came about in the first place. Seems to have little to do with refugees and more to do with fighting Assad, while Assad's trying to fight jihadists. The province in question, Idlib, is where Syria's last remaining jihadist opposition has set up base. Worth mentioning here is that Erdogan helped create the refugee crisis of 2015. Turkey supported ISIS in lots of ways, just so they can stick it to the Kurds and Syria. Among other things, opening their borders to 40,000 foreign jihadists so they can travel through Turkey and reach Syria, as well as giving them weapons and even hospital care if they got wounded. A former special envoy told CNN, quote, "I tried to persuade Turkey to seal its borders against ISIS. They said they couldn't do it. But the minute Kurds took parts of the border, it immediately became sealed with a wall." Very tasteful. Meanwhile, Kurdistan is gonna prosecute ISIS fighters before Sweden does. Doesn't really make Turkey look that good, does it? Doesn't make Sweden look good either, but that's expected. This is all geopolitical drama, and you could argue that Europe could have done more to offer comfort to refugees in the conflict area. But you could also argue that Erdogan is an Islamist piece of excrement who hates Europeans, hates white people, and wants to see Europeans marginalized in their own countries. In 2017, Erdogan urged Turks to have 5 children each, so they eventually can become many more than the Europeans. He claims having higher birth numbers than Europeans would be protection against social injustices of the European Union. And by this he refers to Germany not allowing Turkish ministers to hold campaign rallies on their territory. Probably because Erdogan got more and more authoritarian as the years went on, but we'll get into that later. You see, all of this was happening during a referendum campaign of his that would potentially let him stay in office until 2029. Because of this, he started calling both Belgium and Germany Nazis. Just just like you would expect from a small-dick tyrant with an Islamist identity politics complex. Thankfully, Greece refuses to be bullied nor deceived. Their prime minister said he won't be blackmailed into supporting Turkey's war efforts in Syria. So just think about that when leftist media is bitching about this being a humanitarian issue. It really isn't in the way they're describing it. Turkey's support for radical Islamists intensified the civil war in Syria. Then when millions of refugees went to Turkey, Erdogan extorted money from the European Union to manage the refugee crisis, which he helped create. Now he's complaining about not getting enough money from the European Union while destabilizing the very area these migrants are coming from. Turkey certainly helped create the humanitarian crisis that certain leftist media now is blaming Greece for. Now keep in mind, the reason that shit hasn't fully hit the fan yet is just because Greece is doing such a fantastic job of protecting Europe against illegals, so they deserve plenty of credit and support for that. Funny enough, even the European Union is acting pretty woke on this, with clear support for Greece, financial support, as well as directly thanking them for being the outer shield of Europe. Obviously, they don't want Europe's nationalist right to grow any stronger, which they would with a new migrant crisis. Speaking of which, Sweden's nationalist party leader did something pretty awesome. He actually traveled down to Turkey, down to the border, and handed out flyers to migrants letting them know that Sweden is full. Because it is. The flyer said there's no more welfare or housing to offer, which is an objective description of Swedish reality. This is why a majority of our municipalities are now cutting down on welfare and elderly care just to sustain. Not to mention all the hospitals that are too full to look after their cancer patients. But as you can imagine, facts don't really matter to some, as this still caused an uproar amongst the Swedish left, and one lawyer even tried reporting him to police. Åkesson eventually got deported from Turkey because they didn't like his opinion making, at which point government officials and the broader Swedish left cheered all over Twitter. Poetic justice. Oh, the irony. It's a shame that Sweden is so full when this happens. Why would a Swedish politician travel to a different country and break their laws? So nobody is gonna comment on how insane it is to get deported over a flyer? Okay, notice how the same people who celebrate fascist Turkey for deporting someone over a flyer think it's racist to deport the gang that raped your daughter. So that's your idea of morality? When 58% of rapes in Sweden are done by people born outside of Sweden, you don't want to do deportation. You think it's racist and bad and evil. But when a right-winger you don't like gets deported over an opinion, deportation is the best thing ever to you? That's the only time you'll celebrate it? Not when someone live streams a rape on Facebook. Not when migrants leave 48 jizz stains after the gang rape of a single mother. You don't want to see any deportations then, do you? It's insane how our socialist feminist left party, in the middle of this thing, come out and say that Greece needs to back down and allow open borders for Europe, when open borders made European women unsafe. So this is all the proof I need to state that the Swedish left loves rape. Normal people want to keep women safe. You just don't. While calling yourself feminist, thinking that will make up for it. But as I so eloquently summarized with 1,000 sources in this video, the historical feminist government of Sweden is the biggest threat against women we've had for decades. The EU foreign policy chief said it himself. Don't go to the border. The border is not open. If someone tells you can go, that is just not true. As far as I see it, Åkesson is really just reflecting EU recommendations here, and I'm happy the Swedish politicians has the balls to actually live their ideals. Swedish liberals don't even have the balls to put up election posters in the ghetto. It's important to understand that Erdogan's political move with migrants reflects a long-standing decline that's been happening in Turkey. A lot of Western powers were hoping that Turkey would go further towards secularization, as positive reforms were made at one point. But even so far back as the 90s, Erdogan declared that democracy is only a vehicle, a tool, not a goal unto itself. implying that democracy becomes irrelevant as far as it wouldn't suit his own purpose. Fast forward a couple of years later, and it's made obvious. After the failed coup in 2016, Erdogan tried to bully Facebook and Twitter into sharing data on government critics. Journalists got thrown in jail for criticizing the government, and they shut down over 100 media outlets for the same reason. Erdogan also seized assets of political opponents and clamped down on dissent while gaining total control over the levers of Turkish power. Businesses who don't support his party get punished with massive fines. He even went so far as to release tens of thousands of prisoners to make room for coup suspects. But these included anything from military staff directly responsible to non-affiliated teachers and intellectuals who just happened to attend the same schools as the Muslim cleric whose beliefs allegedly inspired the coup. In the end, more than 40,000 people got detained just over guilt by association, and Erdogan clearly exploited the failed coup to punish political opponents in general, whether they're violent or peaceful. At the same time, a lot of Turks love Erdogan because of his spending on infrastructure, building roads and hospitals and whatnot, but this is all based on massive debt, meaning that if the country can't pay back this debt, it will eventually end up in financial crisis. And a lot of these loans are foreign loans from the United States and such. We can now read, quote, "The exodus of cash from Turkey has wiped away nearly half the value of the nation's currency. This has lifted the price of imported goods, forcing Turks to pay more for food and fuel." As of June 2018, Turkish private companies carried foreign currency debts reaching 220 billion. This is roughly 1/4 of the nation's overall economy. A global chief economist says that Turkey could very well be the next country to disintegrate, as it has all the ingredients of the beginning of a failed state. The reason I'm bringing this up is because it's important for people to like politicians for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. And Turks need to realize that they're being manipulated. Erdogan is not good for the Turks' reputation globally, and ultimately his behavior forces the Turks to be at odds with the rest of Europe. But more importantly for Turkey's citizens, Erdogan is running the country into the ground with his never-ending thirst for power. And I find it's important to distinguish people from their government. Just like George W. Bush doesn't define Americans, Erdogan doesn't define Turks. Because it's the same problem as Iran. The government is Islamist, but the people are actually quite secular. Turkey is a beautiful country with a beautiful culture. And if you want to strengthen those Western secular tendencies, it's important not to lump everyone together.